Welcome, everyone. I see a few new names on the screen today. I'm Maria Grzenka, and this is Lean Portland Happy Hour. Lean Portland is a group of Lean and Six Sigma professionals who started gathering together to share our experience with each other outside of our workplaces, and ideally working towards putting those resources out in the community. So overall, what we're really trying to do is help people make work better. And there's a couple different ways listed here that you can connect with us. Over the years, what we've kind of landed on doing a few different activities. The first is our first Tuesday happy hour. Welcome. So this started as an actual happy hour after work meetup where we just talk about what kind of projects we were working on. Over the years, that shifted to also having occasional speakers and activities. We also do some other free educational workshops, both as a way to share different perspectives and techniques in Lean, but also as a way for other people to develop their teaching skills. And we've also, over the years, done a lot of volunteer consulting with different organizations, nonprofit organizations in our community, using Lean and Six Sigma project-based methods. I'm going to hand it over to Meei to introduce Lina and our topic for tonight.
Thank you, Maria. So this is really a privilege, and it's also going to be a lot of fun. I met Lina many years ago when she was doing a presentation at PMI, and I thought it was the best workshop and presentation that I've ever been at a PMI conference. I thought, man, PMI is really stepping up their game, getting some good presenters here. Well, it took a couple of years, but I ran into Lina again later on, and it's just been wonderful. I mean, I've just learned so much about how to warm up a room, get everybody interacting with each other, and I think this will just be, I think everyone here will enjoy this. So I'm going to turn this over to Lina with just that short introduction. Lina, it's all yours.
Thanks.
Welcome to Lean Portland.
Thank you, Meei. Thank you. I know some names in here, and it's true. Meei and I have worked together before. Maria and I have we've worked together in the Future of Work meetup group, also out of Portland. It's also a global community with a 24-hour open space event, and I think some of you might have been there as well. I'm, like we're just all friends, and I'm getting pulled in with this hat on, with my business hat on. So thanks for inviting me in, and I'm glad to see a lot of people here today. I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can kind of dive in. I got some slides that I was going to share with you as we're focusing on virtual facilitation, different little skills, some tools also in terms of hopefully give you some inspiration and maybe also kind of level up your confidence and skills in terms of virtual holding space, like facilitating with a group of people in a work context. I wanted to actually get us started with a little activity. I put a bunch of images on here on this screen. We're going to use a function in Zoom that probably you know, but it's called annotation. So annotation means that you can draw on the screen that you have here in front of you. So on the question here of where are you most productive, or where do you feel that you really get in flow or creative, like say you have to beef out a big proposal, or you're maybe preparing for something that you are facilitating, a meeting that you're hosting, where are you most productive? If you're looking at these different images, is it when you're in dialogue with other people? Is it when you're at your dining room table? Is it when you're in a dialogue with others? Is it at a separate office space? So I'm right now going to mark here, I'm just putting an X here. That's where I am most productive, often in a coffee shop, taking a moment away from my home office. So the annotation here is under your view option in Zoom, there's like a bar that opens down, and one of those options is called annotation. That comes down, then you can click the drawing tool, and you can click a color also, and then you can just mark one of these images. So please look at these images and mark one, or maybe there's several that kind of indicate, that speaks to you in terms like, oh, that's where I'm productive. That's a place where I really get good ideas, either solo or with other people. I see a couple of people are marking here. Yes. Maddie, you got it. You just need a different, maybe a different, yes, we see your, and Dominique there as well. Good. Okay, so someone marked this corner office over here to the left with a yellow little mark. Why is that? The person who marked that the solo office there, all neatly organized. Why is that a creative space for you, or a productive space for you?
That was me.
Yeah.
It was what you hinted at in what you just said. It's a clean, organized space. I'm feeling the vibes of 5S in that location. And if I know where everything is, then I feel that I can focus on other things that I need to focus on. So
Yeah.
I like having that space where I know where everything is, and I can almost close my eyes and grab what else I need.
Yeah, you can just kind of be in flow because you know the space, and you can orientate, you know what, it's safe for you in that way, right? And known. Okay, cool. And someone marked the coffee, the kind of bustling coffee shop here. Say a little bit, why is that a good space for you?
That was me and Maddie. Something about the noise kind of occupies the parts of my brain that wander, so I can really focus in. And at home, sometimes I'll YouTube like coffee shop noises and play it just to get that same effect, and it works just as well. It's not necessarily about the place, such as the sounds of the place.
Cool. So really that ambience of the coffee machine, or people moving around, that gives you, that's a comforting space for you, and a place where you really get your juices flowing. Good. Thank you, Maddie. Someone put, let's hear from one more person here. The outdoor space there. A couple of people I think marked that, but out to the right, someone is sitting out in a backyard, I think maybe. Why is that a good space for you?
That green M is me, and I like that there's a little greenery. It looks like there's some light coming from up above, and it just feels nice to me. I also put an M in the bottom kind of middle with the group and the one person talking, and I like teamwork as well, so I have like two different ways of thinking and working that I prefer.
Cool, thank you. So what we're doing here is just a quick little icebreaker. So if I was going to hold a long meeting, say we're together for like the next 2 or 3 hours, we're going to brainstorm around some strategy we're making in our team. This could be a way of kind of warming up the room. I could have had a question that was maybe linked more directly into the topic, the strategy we was about to build for each other, or I could also maybe intentionally choose not to have that link. That would be, different ways of how we can do icebreakers. What I'm doing here also is that I'm giving you visuals instead of doing like an audio or written prompt, right? I'm getting you all an opportunity to go to another part of your brain by using visuals to get sparks, different images and different ways of thinking. And what I'm also doing here is that if I was going to do like a 2 or 3 hour brainstorming sessions with you, we would probably be using different aspects of the Zoom tool. So what I'm doing here as well as a facilitator, I'm getting you familiar with an annotation portion of the tool, but in a safe setting. Right? Oh, we're just playing around, and what are you thinking about this? If we're gonna writing a bunch of things out or reacting to things on a slide, you're now comfortable. So I've also guided you to get familiar with the tool. One thing that I want to point out here is that when we are virtually facilitating and we are doing virtually, we need to be aware of one of the premises of the online space, and that is that humanness that comes very naturally when we're in the same space, physical space, is not there. So we have to cultivate that in one way or another instead. And creating icebreakers is one way of doing that, right? Like a way to get to know each other. What I also did here was that instead of saying, can I hear from some of you? I kind of just pointed out, oh, who reacted to certain of these images, and then please speak up, right? So we're already now also create a little bit of comfortableness on the audio here by people speaking up already. And hopefully what I'm creating is also a space of like, oh, this is curious. I want to be part of this. What's happening? And also she's asking me to participate, so I can't like just disappear and be inactive. I'm asking you indirectly to be active and participating. So several things I'm accomplished as a facilitator by these small little things of you drawing on a screen and asking you something about where you're most productive as you are doing. So what I'm going to do in this presentation here today is to kind of go through some activities, but then also kind of go and do high levels, like what have I done here? What's the intention behind why I'm doing an activity like this? So I kind of just pulled us right in intentionally. And when Meei before was saying, like early on when we joined 5 minutes before the rest of you, she's like, should I present you and or kind of introduce you? And I was like, no, let's just get started. I just rather wanted to be informal. And then here is the formal slide of who I am. My name is Line Morkbak. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I'm a facilitator of collaboration. I run my own business and have been working in the remote hybrid space for the last 17 years. And I support global teams as they are collaborating with each other. Many of my clients are across different time zones, so the global component is almost always present in my work, which is why also the remote portion and the virtual pieces. What I was thinking we were going to focus on today is a little bit of these different kind of process. What's the process during virtual sessions? What are some elements do you want to add into your virtual sessions to kind of hold the space? One of them is this, like the ice breaking. I want to talk a little bit about the role of the virtual facilitator, also about the asynchronous mindset and how we can use what we're doing right now is that we're synchronous together, but how can we also do things that's more asynchronous? And then I have a different tools I can open up, so we can do a little tools tour as well, depending on how much time we have. And then there'll be time for some final, some more kind of conversation. It's not really a Q&A, but more just a broader conversation as a group in the end here as well. So I want to do the annotation here again, because I want you to just look at these 5 different items that I have planned for us to focus on. Which of this is most interesting for you? And what are some of the things that like speaks most to you? It's like, oh, that is definitely where I have curiosity. Like maybe it's the tools. Maybe it's like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about asynchronous mindset, doing things async. What does that really mean? So again, pull on the annotation and mark 1 or 2 of these things that I was thinking we were going to cover, and let me know where's your interest.
How many can we mark?
We got a couple. You could mark all 5, but I just kind of the purpose here is to say, yeah, this is a little bit more of interest to me than other things, right? So a lot of focus, a lot of interest around the process, but also the role of the facilitator. Good. Well, a little bit of everything, it looks like. Okay, good. What I'm doing here, and I'm going to clear these drawings as well. So if you guys don't know the annotation tool in Zoom, I'm just going to show you what happens if I don't clear the space. If I just move along here with my slides, all your annotation moves with me. Okay, So where, if you ever, I use annotation a lot because it's a way for people to react to a list of things or be part of a presentation when you're using slides. So that's why I'm clearing all the drawings, because else they're going to follow us onto the next slides. Good. What we're doing here, again, just kind of want to do a little bit of high level, is that I am kind of doing more of a check-in or some sort of alignment, right? Like, what's the focus? Why are we here? And not just telling you like, this is why I'm here and here's my agenda, but also giving you a chance to look at, what of this is maybe most interesting for me? We actually learn, or our brain fires up when we get an opportunity to go in and say, what do I think about this? It gives the facilitator or the one who are leading the meeting an idea of like, oh, we should spend more time over here compared to this over here. But it also gives you an opportunity as a participant to be like, oh, okay, yeah, actually, what am I interested in of those things that we're going to be focusing on here? Check-ins and alignment can look very different. I want to share my screen here because I want to show a couple of different ways that I've done alignments in other groups. This is a screenshot, I'm just sharing a board here. This is another tool that's called Jamboard. Many of you probably know a Jamboard. It's in the Google Suite, and it's the simplest whiteboard that's around. And for this, I was facilitating a virtual retreat for a board here in Oregon, a nonprofit board. And part of the alignment for us to come together, we were together for 2 full days remotely, not full days, but 6 hours in total remote over 2 days. So part of the alignment was that we created a collaboration agreement. So that can be another way of like, why are we here? How do we want to show up? So a reaction to an agenda, reviewing an agenda, building the agenda together is a way to get in and get that portion around check-in or alignment. Why are we here? Especially when we're doing meetings with our colleagues and they're jumping from one meeting to the next, like, whoa, why are we here? Why are we spending time here? And getting people on board. So that's another step that I personally think, as we are facilitating and holding virtual space, that we need to be aware of. When we are looking at the role of the facilitator, I want to kind of focus on here how a facilitator is not a presenter. I think sometimes we have a tendency to end up being lecturing for people, or if we are a team lead and it's always us who are facilitating the meetings, then we're just screen sharing, we're just leading the meeting, and it becomes like we're presenting, and then we're like, oh, why are people so quiet? Why are they not stepping in? And it's because we're delivering and positioning information for people instead of actually holding space, which is what a facilitator does. Like making sure that there is a format, a space that we can then build things together. So knowledge is created together. The people who are part of the space are the experts, are the ones who are going to need to build and shape things together. And the facilitator is really more guiding or holding the space as such. One thing that I see again and again is that very experienced meeting facilitators face-to-face are very good at doing that face-to-face. When they're just starting to do things remote, there's something about the technology that makes us become doing one-way presentations. So it's something to really be aware of, to still kind of step back and hold that space and do the actual facilitation. So if I was to kind of define what that savvy virtual facilitator is, it is someone who holds the space for a meaningful exchange between the right people who are ready to meet a shared goal, right? So that would be like, this is exactly the people of part of our team that's important to be for this meeting where we're building this kind of strategy for this project, right? Good. So that's a little bit about the facilitator. If we want to kind of specifically look at the virtual facilitator, I think there's like 4 different aspects that's important that we look at, and that is that we think about ahead of time. We're planning, who are the people who's going to be here? Do they know each other? Do we have some language barriers? Are there time difference barriers? Are there some people who are experts on certain things that need to be positioned? What tools are they used to using? I should use what they are typically using, or if I am introducing new tools, how tech savvy are they? How much can I push them? And then plan accordingly in terms of how do I want to set this up. We really do need to do a good portion of planning. The more we do virtual facilitation, you need to do less and less planning, but you can't, in my opinion, you can't just jump in and wing it. Then it's not the best way of holding that kind of space. So be intentional about your planning. It doesn't have to be hours. It can be just 15 minutes, but be intentional about the planning. When we start talking about the asynchronous in a bit, then we'll loop in about why that planning is also important. Then it is also the virtual facilitator's role to really hold space. And for holding space, it's both for it to be a place we can get a lot of work done, depending on what goal we have. We want to make sure it's productive. You've probably all been in sessions where it's like, well, it's so important, we get to know each other. And then half an hour later, we're still doing the icebreaker and checking in, how's everyone doing? And it's like, yeah, that's good, but wow, the other meeting we also did that. And and then it's just like, actually now it's not productive anymore, right? So it's finding that balance of making sure that we're like, yes, we are getting that humanness in, and we're inviting that in. People are comfortable, people are feeling safe to speak up. Again, this is also how we use the tool, how much we're using our chat, how much we're using an online board at the same time. But we want to make sure it's productive, and we want to make sure that it's a comfortable, safe space for us as colleagues to come together. And by safe, I mean, yes, we can push everyone a little bit on the technology side, but as a facilitator, you create the tone. So you want to make sure that you keep a good eye on the chat in terms of having a safe space. I would never call anyone out and being like, oh, Thomas, you've been quiet. Let's hear what's going on. Whoa, that's the last thing Thomas wants to know. There's a reason he's quiet, either because he's just processing differently, or he's not on camera today because he's got 2 kiddos in the background and he's trying to multitask his job and the kiddos who's homesick, or, like, you wouldn't, that's not a way of creating a safe space, right? So a safe space is where I use the chat a lot, or written or annotation a lot, and then being like, oh, you already reacted here. Tell me some more. I can see people have a point of here or a comment around this. Tell me some more. And then you pull people in. That's a way of making it safe. A third piece here is that we don't have to be experts, but we are, as facilitator, we are holding the space with some confidence, as well as that care, so people know that, okay, she got this, right? If they will figure it out, even if some of the tech doesn't work, they'll figure it out and they'll hold the space for us. If we deviate away from the agenda, don't worry, they will hold us back to that agenda. So there's also a firmness around, I often say when I'm a facilitator, I'm also the person who's holding the time, that I'm time boxing things, like, okay, that's great. I'm also going to, like, put my facilitator hat on, make sure that we're actually getting into the pieces that we need to do. That's part of the productivity as well. We're gonna park that for a moment, and I'm going to guide us over here. So that's also a way that you then feel, okay, the facilitator is holding this space. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole. These people who maybe have a tendency to take up too much space, the facilitator is making sure that they're not dominating as well. That is part of how that confidence is shown as well. And then of course, making sure we have as much engagement for our participants as possible. And that can be using different tools of how we're pulling people in. Breakout rooms, the chat, and I'm going to just open up another tool that I use quite a lot. Different kind of online tools. So here is I'm sharing my Miro board from a workshop I did. Here you can see I put a slide in, and people added their post-it notes in terms of their individual reflection, their goals around our workshop. So this was an activity around the alignment, like I was talking about before. But as we are then also going out and having breakouts, instead of just having people break out blind, if you may, I give them a space that they can like here. They're like talking about their discussion. I'm giving the prompts about what they're discussing. They have that virtually written here on the screen. And as they're going into their breakout room in Zoom, they have a place where they can add all their notes here, right? So this is a way to also create engagement. They also have all this afterwards. For this particular workshop, we were meeting for several times. So I'm just zooming out here. This was this is our home here. It's about hybrid team synergy. We were meeting over 3 weeks. We were meeting with learning partners in between, and here's all the work that the learning partners were doing. And then we have our second workshop here, and we're doing activities again in different spaces to create this, making this engagement, right? Where people can add, you can see they're adding links here, as well as they've been adding different notes around the conversation. And again, they were in breakout rooms and added their notes on breakout rooms. So this is ways that you can use tools to make sure that you create that kind of engagement.
My brain kind of got stuck on that intentional planning piece, because I'm remembering back to when we all switched everything from in-person to virtual. And one thing I noticed right away was that I really had to, I took for granted all the things that I could process automatically by being in the same room as people. And then in a virtual space, I had to intentionally plan for those things that used to be automatic. I'm wondering if you can like drill down like maybe one section into that planning piece.
Yeah, very good point here. So often what I do when I do like a bigger, like a workshop, for example, over like 3 weeks, or a meeting that's like 2 hours long, I go in and I really like I think about it, I write down, use post-it notes or write down on a piece of paper or in a Google Doc, but like what are the things that we want to get to and what are the purpose, right? And then I start thinking, how can I where do I want discussion? Where do I want to have the brainstorm? Is that a good brainstorm that we're doing the whole group together? Is this a good brainstorm that I definitely want people to go out in groups? Ooh, this could be great that we actually just pairing people up on this. I know that there's some of the participants who might not be speaking out in a larger group, but if they're in pairs, they have to talk to someone. It's very safe. They're just with one other colleague. I might pair them up with language matches. Oh, these Spanish speakers can be together. These German speakers can be together. You know, like, so I'm constantly thinking like, yes, we're discussing this and we make a decision on this. Those are maybe the 2 things we need to do in this 2 hours, but how do I want to build that up? And then I wouldn't do like 3 breakouts back to back, right? And I would probably build, do people know each other ahead of time? Are we doing something that's a little bit creative to begin with? Of like, oh, let's all draw something together, and I'm giving you a prompt, and then we're on a blank white screen, for example, and we're all drawing, and I step away from as a facilitator, and people have to draw. What does say we're discussing and I can't even think about something like we're discussing the marketing plan, and let's draw the success of the marketing plan. Wow, that's weird. How do I even do that? And I'm going to give you 8 minutes as a group to draw that out, and there's going to be laughter. I'm like, oh my God, how do we do this? And we're already kind of got some gelling going on, right? And then I can start pulling some of that out. So to answer your question, Maria, to plan, as you can hear just kind of how my brain works, right? I'm just starting to say, I would really start thinking what are the activities that we would start doing to slowly build up for that decision that we're making, for example, right? And shake that up quite a bit and not do repetitive things, right? But kind of moving people along. One thing that I'm doing right now, you can also see I've been sharing my screen, I've been sharing my slides. As soon as I see Maria had a question, and good, I'm glad you spoke up because I missed that you had your hand up. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm also stopped sharing here. So now we're out and we're all discussing and I can see you, and then I can go back and share. Right, so this is just a simple technique. So sometimes we forget, and it's the difference between being that presenter. Oh, she's the keynote, or he's like talking about his book, blah 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 blah. That's the difference. That's just right there. This small little shift becomes the oh, I'm facilitating a dialogue. And I don't know if you sense it, but if anyone wanted to pitch in what I was just kind of answering Maria's question here, you feel more engaged than you actually could if you had something to say. Then me sharing my screen and answering Maria's question, right? So there's these small little subtle ways that we can do quite a bit by going back and forth between tools and navigating just the simple things that we have in something like Zoom. I actually want to pause right here because another little technique that I often do, and I'm actually going to just show you the slide that's in here in my deck. Because when we do something virtually, we sometimes forget, and there's a lot of things we can do in the bells and whistles of the tools, but pen and paper is awesome. So right now, I'm actually just going to give you a minute, and I'm literally going to put my timer for a minute, and I want you just to grab a pen and a Post-it note or a piece of paper, and just and you're not sharing this with anyone, this is for you. Just pause and write down for yourself, what was the takeaway of what we've just kind of that had come up and what I've shared and what come up in what we've done so far. What was just a simple or maybe a more bigger or complex takeaway for you so far? So that was about a minute. So one of the things that I did here as well, and those of you who've seen either been in a workshop with me, or I would say I don't think I always do this, like about halfway through or 2/3 in, pause. And when we have meetings with our colleagues, I would recommend have just 2 or 3 minutes or just a minute for people to be like, oh, of these, what is most important? Or what's my suggestions around this? We're about to brainstorm something. Our online space gets like, we want to do things very fast and we can move things very fast. Our best ideas, it's okay for that just to sink and be like, hey, actually, what do I think about this? Or what was a takeaway? Or what do I have to pitch in here? We get it when we do breakouts, but to have people to have quiet on the audio, to put pen to paper, something happens in our brains. My youngest is an 8th grader, and I was telling him, you have to start being better at taking notes. Next year it's high school, and there's something about what happens when we start doing physical notes. And he's like, oh, I'll just add notes on the screen. Like, yeah, there's, don't forget your pen and paper. So it can be, it actually is an engagement technique when we're doing virtual facilitation as well. Sometimes in my bigger workshops, I create activities where I have people print out a certain piece of paper, they have to fold it or write on it, and literally because we do something different when we manipulate with something. And so just because we can do fancy things in a mirror board doesn't mean that we can't still have people write things down on a Post-it note. Or write things down on a piece of paper. And that's a way of creating engagement. And as pull back to Maria, like it's another way of saying, as I'm planning, when am I pausing and people are reflecting? When am I pausing? Am I doing anything where I want them to? It can also be as simple as like grab an object, or in your pairs, draw something together where one of you is talking and one person is drawing it, and then you come back and show it. Or, you know, like there can be different ways like that. We do that face to face all the time, because we know that creative portion is like, we love our stickies, we love our markers, and yes, we can do some of that in a mirror board, but we can do stuff combining our spaces there as well. Okay, I'm gonna move us back to slides here. I know I'm kind of going a little bit fast on some of these things, but we will also have time to discuss some more. A little bit more I want to say. Diane, it looked like you were about to say something. Oh, you were just breathing, or maybe like taking. Good. Want to talk a little bit about the asynchronous and as a mindset. So when we are creating engaging meetings or engaging virtual setups, I think it's important that we don't overload them. So you can see here, like, kind of actually have one purpose, and don't start being like, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that. Like, either have small portions and being like, well, if in this meeting we're welcoming our new team member and we are hearing this person making a presentation, and then we are brainstorming based on that presentation, I would be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Actually meeting our new team member, that shouldn't be part of our meeting. Let's just have a more informal, let's meet our new team member. That's a 20 minutes. It's not part of our meeting. We're doing that separately. And then if we're actually like having a presentation, actually, no, this is when we want to start doing the async. That presentation could be async. That could have been recorded ahead of time and we could all have viewed it. So then, and we could maybe even had an online board where we started adding comments about that presentation or ask questions around that presentation. And then what we're then doing for our meeting is to make a decision based on how we then going forward on our next project, now that we have that presentation in the back of our heads, right? Like, so that's what I mean about trying to be having one max 2 purposes per meetings. And if we can see our agenda is packed with a lot of stuff, start looking at, is this several smaller meetings, or there's some of these things that maybe could be done asynchronous? Because this is what I'm meaning in terms of it, meaning by this is being a process. It feeds into each other. That the hybrid meeting or the virtual meeting is more of a process. And what's out in this prior and post, we can do that asynchronously. And then there is this portion that we can do synchronously. So what we're doing right now is synchronously. We're doing that during, we're on different time zones, we're tuned into the same virtual tool right here. And you can see it put some percentages down here. This would be for a meeting where it's like, let's not try and do like 80% in here. Let's put a whole bunch of stuff out in that prior, and let's make sure there's some things in that post. And then it becomes a circle that continues. And that's that process that feeds into each other. Just want to kind of define, like, the synchronous is when we're doing it same time. And that's ideal for a lot of different discussions, and if we need to solve certain issues right in front of us. The asynchronous can be done anytime, so that's great if we have people in different time zones. It's also great if we want to honor different processing styles, because the synchronous, that's honoring those on-the-spot thinkers, strong individualists, strong extroverts. A lot of asynchronous are actually really supporting our more introvert colleagues, people who like get an idea because they can see 4 other ideas that's on the board, and then they get another brilliant idea based on what they just saw. But if you just ask them, like, what do you think? They'll be like, yeah, I don't know. Should we do what we did last time? You know, but when they start seeing all the ideas on the board asynchronously, maybe they have, and asynchronously, they all have time, also have time to digest this over 2 or 3 days. Then they start bubbling up. If we're also talking a team that's in different locations, they're talking with their colleagues on site, in the cafeteria, and they're like, oh, and then they get ideas based on that bring back into the meeting, right? We're getting so much out of that asynchronous space. Want to just show, I'm going to go back and screen share here a couple of tools, there's a couple of examples of how I have used the asynchronous in workshops or in meeting settings. So here, for example, this is a Padlet board, very simple online tool, like a wall you can build, you can design it up how you want. Here, this was an international group, Americans, Israelis, Danes, I think that was it. And part of the asynchronous work I had them do was to have little, I put it in first here, like, oh, what is important when you're building trusting relationships? And I asked them to doodle, right? And then write a little bit on it here. And then everyone ahead of our first time meeting had created little doodles and uploaded them and put some notes down, right? So tons of work. This group had never met before, and they added all this stuff in first, and started. You see me as the facilitator. I wrote more comments in here, but everyone could add comments. So the asynchronous was that I created a video to introduce myself, and then in that video I screen shared how to use the Padlet board. Then I did my own portion, and then I gave them a deadline about before next week. They had to upload this and make comments. And then I gave them a little gentle reminder about halfway through. So this is async. So tons of things that got established in terms of that group feeling safe with each other and getting to know each other in that asynchronous space. Here's another example, also a Padlet board, but it's defined very different. This group were taking pictures of their creative space. And talking about where were they creative, and what spaces were they using for that. This was a conversation around hybrid. Another quick one I want to use. This is a fun new tool I'm exploring. This is a tool that's called Times Flowers. So it's called a flower, and what it does is that you can create a video, and you can see this video I created here. I'm just pausing it again, but it goes as a flower around, it's like a minute long. And then when I'm saying certain things, I can link things. So those becomes petals of the flower. And so this was again some homework that I created for a group, right? This is a homework for a third session. So then they got all their prompts here. Here's a PDF they can download. Here's a space they can go into. And here's a mirror board that they can also add their comments to. And here's another video I created around some reflections as well. And then they could have added additional flowers to each of these. So this is all happening async. But it's a way of, so just to show you that sending a video doesn't need to be a one-way communication. This is actually a way of almost using a video as like an email string that then becomes this like a flower, like a pattern of where people could have added a video here, or they could have added a video to this blueprint, right? And added into this. So just kind of wanted to share with you some, as we're talking about an asynchronous mindset, what does that even mean? Like, what can we start playing around with when we are splintering things and saying, when we're facilitating things online, it's not just now, it's also what are we prepping? And that's part of Maria's question in terms of planning. If I want us to land on this over here, and that's where I'm guiding the group, what can I maybe even plan asynchronous? And then we meet synchronous. And then are we then meeting? Often I have set people up with learning pairs. Then you're discussing something in pairs. So it's not asynchronous, but it's also not everyone together, like a group of 20, but you're meeting in pairs. You're adding some of those reflections into that mirror board. Then all of us meet again. Maybe you read something, like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff we can do. So when we start talking virtual, it's way more. It's way more than like, oh, let's turn on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. I shared a lot here. I want to pause here because of, I think, definitely half an hour I've been talking. Maria, Meei, and like, what do you want us to just open up for conversation here? Where do you want us to go?
I'd like to hear from the room, from everyone. I mean, and if they have anything that they feel like, boy, this is just a great tool I just learned, or how do I do this other thing? I'd like to hear from other folks in the room.
Some reactions to some of this here.
Hi, this is Steph. One of the ideas I really liked that you mentioned was like to stop sharing your screen when you're like, that is something that I am going to do tomorrow. Like, it's so simple, like such a simple idea. And, it's like one thing actually, one thing that I like to do, I often turn off my camera because I do get up and like move around, and it's distracting for people if they're not that anyone just sitting there watching me. But if they were, it might be distracting. But I like to turn on my camera when I do speak. It's like, hey, I'm here. Like, hi, everyone. I see your faces. And so I do that when I'm in a meeting.
Yeah.
But yeah,
do you give context to why you turn off your camera? Like, oh, I'm moving around, I don't want to distract you, and then
sometimes, or like, I also talk with my hands a lot, and so if I'm presenting something, I might say, hey, I'm going to turn off my camera because you're just going to see me doing this throughout the whole time, and it's yeah.
Because I think it's important to give context. I often being asked like, oh, should we ask everyone to have a camera on, and should we enforce it? And I would never enforce it. I always invite people to do it. I often prep ahead of time, being like, if you're able, please do. If you're able at a little portion, or and then if you do turn it off, like, give context, like, oh, I'm going to eat my lunch, I'm right here, or I've been on a lot of meetings, so I can only do so much screen time right now, so I'm going to be in and out of having my video on, or I'm presenting and I'm walking around, I don't want to make you guys seasick, right? That kind of. And I think as a facilitator, it is, I do think it is important in terms of the whole video thing that we are quite a lot on video, so that create that safe space for others to feel that, like, they hear a tone of voice, but they also hear our own reflections, or our pause, or they see that in our face. Like, I know if I have a technical issue, they can also see them trying to solve it on my face, right? Like, oh, it just makes us as facilitators a little bit more human as well.
There's a comment in chat.
Go ahead, Meei.
Is that what you were doing? Reading the chat. So NAE, or I'm going to say Nay, comments that I like the idea of having silent pause time occasionally after bursts of interaction. And I like that too. It's just another simple little tool, but it kind of gets everybody, gives a little space to kind of look at my notes, or catch up on writing something, or just absorbing.
And I would say it actually also, as a facilitator, it gives you a moment to be like, am I going the right direction? Is there energy in the room I'm not picking up on? Did I miss something in the chat? Because sometimes as we are facilitating, there is a tendency, and that's fine, but we're on in a certain way, right? So which means that unintentionally we can dominate, or we can kind of take over. So the pause can also be something you kind of giving yourself, of like, okay, I'm giving everyone a moment, but also giving myself a moment to like, are we going the right direction? Am I actually hearing from everyone how I want? Just that kind of space. Dominique, it looked like you were just about to say something.
Yeah. Can you please comment on, when I first see this and I see all the different tools that you're using, and I want to preface this with, I love using different tools, so I'm on that side of it. But from the surface, it looks like you would lose some sense of scalability. But as I'm seeing the different benefits of using the different tools, like the Padlet board and the Times flowers, can you comment on how you feel that this has given better quality each time, and how you've maybe, I don't know, maybe you say that this actually is more scalable now that you've pre-recorded certain things and you might be able to piece together other modules. But from the outside looking in, hearing this for the first time and seeing all these different tools, it feels cumbersome. It's enticing to me, but it feels cumbersome to say, like, I'm gonna have to learn how to use all of these and pre-plan for all of the meetings that I have to facilitate. Like,
No.
enlighten us, please.
No, no. I build, of course, this knowledge of these tools over time, right? And it's part of the assessing your group or assessing your team, is to like, what are good tools for us to use? It's not about the more the merrier at all. And it really is like, what's my team comfortable using? What they may be using already? Can we use it better or use it more integrated? Say, oh, we already use we use Jamboards, but oh, we can start using Jamboards asynchronous. Instead of just using it during our meetings to capture notes, we can start using that same very simple tool asynchronously. So you're just expanding the use of that, right? Overall, I would say when you do virtual facilitation, you need a good, what we're having right now, a good virtual meeting room, and then a place to take notes. And yes, you can use a whiteboard in Zoom here or a whiteboard in Microsoft Teams. I would strongly encourage that place is a place that lives in the cloud, that is an asynchronous tool. So where you're taking notes during your session, you can also take notes after or before. So those are the two things you really need, in my opinion, like good quality video meeting and like a online board for everyone to access, and a Jamboard, a Miro board, a Padlet board. Those are all they're just different. They do it differently and they look a little different, but they're doing that same thing. I would typically not, with a team that I'm working with, say I'm working with a team for the next 6 months, I would set us up with, these are the tools, 2-3 tools we're using. We're meeting here, and this is where we're taking our notes, and this is where we're maybe linking all our documentation in here, and it could just be the Google Suite. You're just using Jamboard and Excel sheet, and then you're just linking in that. But we all know where our team virtually does our work together. And then I wouldn't start introducing all kinds of other tools, right? So if it's a team who really wants to are more tech savvy, then you can start using a Miro board because you could do more stuff in there. If they're not, just use a Jamboard. Simple, right? You put a post-it notes on and you can draw with a pen. Great, that's what we need. The boards you see me, I make them little, because I use them, so I make them pretty and put logos on. You don't have to, it's just a white sheet and you put a neon green post-it on. Great, it does the work, right? So does that help, Dominique?
That answers it.
Yeah.
It just, in the beginning, it felt like, man, I have to learn all these things to be able to give the perfect environment as I'm facilitating. But what you're saying is it all boils down to 2 things: good meeting space and a place to take notes. And then you can kind of expand as you start to get comfortable with one tool, introduce another one, but that doesn't mean you have to introduce it to that group. It might make sense for a different group.
Exactly. And as you maybe are exploring more as facilitator, you might get curious, like, oh, I wonder if there's a one we could, I mean, when I use Padlet, it's because I like how you can upload visuals in there. So if I do something where we're going to do a lot of drawing, it's a creative group who draw things out or who takes photos and want a visual, a wall of all the ideas, then I would do Padlet. And it's simple because you don't have to, and you can put little hearts, like, I like that idea, and then you comment and everything is in one place. Like Miro you can get more lost. You zoom in and out and it's like, whoa, I get lost, right? Like Padlet is linear. It's just like, okay, I go down and I can see where we've been, and you don't get lost, right? And you post, and then it's like a social media posting setup, right? That most people know. Yeah.
This is Maddie. My question is about if you have any tips for getting people to actually do things asynchronously. In my experience, sometimes it's a great idea and would be really helpful, and then the follow through amongst folks doesn't actually happen, and then I have to spend meeting time accomplishing the same thing, and people get checked out because it's not something that's like best to use meeting time for, but they don't set aside the time except otherwise in the actual meeting.
Yeah, and then it's also like, and you're kind of punishing the people who did do the prep, and by then being like, oh, here we are, we did do the prep, and now we're doing it again because these people didn't do it, right? It's like, great, I'm the good person in class, and then I'm the one who has to do things twice.
And then they're checked out for the rest
then
of
they're
the
definitely
meeting.
checked out, like we all would be, like I've already done it, right? And I'm getting annoyed with my colleagues who didn't do it, because I was busy, but they were apparently busier and didn't do it, right? You know, the whole thing, we could just see what happens in our heads. So very good question, and I bump into that a lot. And when I'm guiding teams to kind of transfer into doing more async, that's something that comes up a lot, like, oh, we tried it and then it doesn't work. So two things, getting people on board so that it's not something like, oh, I think we should do this, and now you have to do this. Like getting people on board in terms of having a discussion with a team of like, are we happy with the length of our meetings? Are we happy with the processing? Like, do we feel that we have a lot of outline meetings early or late? Like, how can we improve that? Because overall, the async, the whole intention is to improve our meeting load, make our meetings more focused, shorter, and fewer. And most people are like, yay, I want to do that, right? Like most people have like a meeting overload, right? And they're like excited when there's a good productive meeting, and often they're actually short. It's not like, oh, we're here for 2 hours and then we're done, right? So getting people on board, so inviting in for a conversation of like, how can we improve it, or like, I have some suggestions, what do we want to try, and then run it as an experiment. And then see if people are on board. Is there a certain meeting that we do every 2 weeks or once a week? Can we the next month, for the next 4 meetings, incorporate doing that, cut that meeting time in half and incorporate asynchronous work? That could be a proposal, right? So kind of getting your colleagues on board, and they might, and if they're not into it, then okay, then I guess you're not doing it. But if you are getting them on board, then they're committed, right? Like, okay, we're doing this. So there's that commitment. And secondly, getting people curious, because you want to get them, you want to create a little bit of, FOMO of like, what happened there that I didn't know? And actually the curiosity is, so that's around reminders, but it's also around videos. Actually, I create a lot of little video teasers of like quick ideas, quick inputs. Like, we click videos all the time of little cats or whatever it's just a quick way to get information. When we're getting to know each other as a team to collaborate, we also get so much more. We get people's enthusiasm in their voices, we get their home office where they created that video, or we just get more, instead of like they write an email like, I think we should do, right? Like, it's like, oh, I have an idea, like, and then they just send a 30 snippet video. So I use video to create those teasers, both to prep like some asynchronous work. This is what I want you to do. Guide them through the tools. So it's like, and it's like, it's 3 minutes. It's not like, oh, I don't know how it works. It's in the video. You can just, I'm walking you through. This is how you post in this tool. Like, you click this, and then here it comes up, and you can, like, so there's guidance. There's something about video in my experience as well. There's something of like, I don't know what, it could be interesting to look at what the psychology is. Like, they see you talking about something, and then they're a little bit more committed to work with you. Like, oh, she showed us that tool, and she already did it, and oh, I want to be in there, do that. I mean, I don't know what it is, but there's something. And then also the gentle reminders is, I try to be like, oh, I can see this and this happen in there, and great comment, Dave. And people are like, what did Dave do in the board? I want to go see that. And then they go do the board, right? Like, and to be honest, Maddie, this is where I'm going to be a little bit devil's advocate, but it does work with the teams that I work with, where you invite in and they're going to do this thing, make the asynchronous work visible, which means everyone can see if it happened or not. And then literally it's like, oh, we need to add these comments, or we need to brainstorm these ideas before our meeting so we can decide on the ideas. If there's no ideas in there, we're rescheduling the meeting. There's absolutely no reason for us to have a meeting on Thursday. If there's
Ooh. I really like that. So Maddie, I'm also having trouble with that. But so imagine that. We'd like you to prepare, and then if no one prepared or only one person prepared, then say that we're going to have to reschedule this meeting.
There's absolutely no reason that we're meeting on Thursday, because we've got nothing to discuss. There's nothing in there.
In my mind, I had a whole conversation just now where I was like, but people are relying on me to make sure we meet the timeline. But then I'm like, how do we make sure we meet the timeline if people aren't doing work? And if we cancel the meeting because they didn't do it, then they're the ones, like, I'm holding them accountable to actually do the work to meet the timeline, and then it's a shared responsibility.
And what I've seen is actually, you only do that a couple of times, and then people are like, oh shit, no one's holding that space. Like, the facilitator is not a mother hen who's holding the space in terms of like, we better do our work. The facilitator holds the space for us to be productive together. And if we're not ready to be productive, then we'll meet next week and be ready to be productive. Like, part of when you're getting people kind of tied, like committed to the async, I also would have that be like, if we're doing this for the next, say we're doing this like scenario, we're doing this for a month in our weekly meetings, and then say, and if there's not, if that asynchronous circle, and that whatever we're asking for that we want to happen in that async, we're going to postpone the meeting. So it's kind of set up, like, you know, like we're going to do this for a month to really get that flow happening, right? So if we're canceling one meeting, do we have a longer meeting the next week, or maybe we only need to meet every 2 weeks? That might also come up, you know, who knows, you know, that's just kind of so, but yeah, good question, Maddie, because that is tricky, and it really comes down to the ownership. Like, are we doing this, or do I think it's a good idea, right? Like, we're doing it together. There's tons of stuff in the chat here. I should look.
While you look at the chat, I'm gonna open a single breakout room, because about this time, you know, this is traditionally happy hour, so sometimes people just want to like, okay, cool, thanks a lot, I just want to like network over here. So there's an optional breakout room that you can self-select to join if you want to do that. We still have time here for several more questions, so if you want to hang out and continue talking about virtual facilitation, that's what we'll do here. One more announcement for me. We have a Lean 101 training coming up on September 14th at noon with Brittany. She was here earlier, so she's running that training. And then next month, happy hour, which is October 6th, we're doing a panel discussion on daily management systems, which is a Lean tool that people use to instill a process for managing their operation on a daily basis. Okay, Lina, back to you.
Well, I just want to say, I love what you're doing right here, right? So in a team setting, in terms of facilitating, isn't that also a great way of saying, oh, we now have the people who want to do informal chatter, they can go over here, and this is going on over here. So one thing I didn't talk so much about, I think, facilitating, and again, this is something we're a lot better at in person, but we can do quite a bit at virtually as well, is to design things so it becomes choice. And part of the async is like you're choosing to step in, right? Like several of us here have also been in open space or flows together, right? So that whole notion of when you're facilitating, and that's the part of that holding space, it can be that what you're just creating the space for those conversations to happen. And I want to actually, around choice, I just want to share my screen on another tool. And this is not for just not in terms of tool overload, just curiosity for you guys, right? So spatial chat is a video conferencing tool, and you can see here I'm logged in, and because I'm using my video and audio here in Zoom, I don't have my video and audio here. But normally this, instead of being my image, this would be my video, and I can move this around in this space. So this is just a spatial chat that I use often. This I put with a just a coffee space background, right? So this is just like if anyone were just kind of informally meeting. So right now, what Maria just did, it could be like, oh, this is where everyone wanted to meet if they just want to chit chat. And then the cool thing about spatial chat is that you just move around, and if there was more people in here, say all 15 of us, or whoever we were left here now, 11 of us are in here, whoever is closest to each other can hear and see each other clearer. If you move away from those people, then you can't hear, they get more faint as you walk away. So it's actually proximity based, like if you're face to face together. But how we can use a space like this when we are when we're facilitating is, so here is another room in spatial chat. I just moved down to this, and here I just created a very simple, because you can move around, I've often used this space for ice-breaking activities. And then, for example, here's a circle, like everyone stand on the circle, and then talk to the person next to you. Listen, like what you would do in a physical space. Or we also, as we are lining up on the circle, we would have an order of speakers, for example. Now I'm going to start, and the person to my right talks next, and then we could do like a round table, for example. We're still doing you would imagine here that we're all our video icons is around here, because that's where I ask you then to line up. But around choice, as we are facilitating, we can also be like, oh, on zone A, we're going to have a conversation around what are we having for dinner. On zone B, we're going to have an exploration around how to do hybrid. On zone here, I'm doing okay. On zone D, we're doing something else, and zone Z. So that means now, instead of breaking people into breakout rooms, I just designated what's happening in these different zones, and then people can just go to the zone that they're interested in and have that conversation. And when they're done with that conversation, they can explore what's happening down here. So if people are familiar with open space, so that's when you kind of can walk in mobility. So that's another way of facilitating, right? You're just setting it up. So a team could do this, like, oh, we're doing strategy for the next 6 months. In zone A, we're going to talk about project A. We're going to, in zone B, we're going to talk about budget. And down there, we're going to talk about blah, blah, blah. You know, people go to where they want to discuss. And so you are holding the space, designing a space for flow and free choice and mobility. So this doesn't mean it doesn't require planning. It's just a different kind of planning. Planning doesn't mean that you're in control. planning means that you hold the container for what kind of process you want people to go through. Just going to want to pause there as well. And curious to hear any reactions if that's like, oh my God, my team would kill me if I put them into that. Or like, oh, that sounds fun. We could play around in here. Any reactions?
I'm writing down your last comment.
I am too.
I
If you-
know.
So, let me see if I
what-
got it right. Planning is holding the container for the process you want people to go through.
Yeah, it's not like, because, and some people facilitate like this. This is not how I facilitate. I would never have an Excel sheet, sorry, where it's like 10 minutes for this, 10 minutes for this, 15 minutes for this. I mean, it depends where it takes us. Like, I had more slides that I could share with you guys that for what I was planning, but this is what our appetite was for. And then I stopped my slides and now we're having a discussion, right? Like, because then we're presenting. Of course, you also asked me to present here, right? So I'm kind of doing a little bit of two things, right? But I wanted to, so I think it's important that it doesn't, that we don't become anal around this, but that we're planning chunks, and that in each of those chunks, there's some interactivity, there's some questions, some contents that being discussed, and then we want to have some conclusions around that, and then we can move to other things, to the next chunk. But we want to make sure that we don't get so, as facilitators, get so hung up on our own planning that we're rushing decisions, or we are bulldozing over people who are processing at a different pace, or we think we're typically way more ambitious when we plan than what we have time for. Like, I don't think, I mean, every year you've done a lot of this. Have you ever had like, oh, I wonder what we're going to do now, right? Like, I mean, you never run out. You always have more. So part of the planning is knowing what is the priority, what can go, what's nice to have. If we deviate in this way, oh, we could do this little fun thing, or we could, you know, but you can kind of navigate that on the fly. And the more you got it planned in your own head or on a piece of paper, the more you can navigate it back and like jumping back and forth, or skip things or something like that.
Wow.
Now that makes me want to see your facilitator notes. I've definitely seen people that do an Excel spreadsheet with approximate times and try to hit the mark. And I'm thinking that you might have it laid out differently. What does it look like, Lina, when you lay it out?
It's often, I have more visual notes, and I use my PowerPoints quite a lot. And that doesn't mean that I'm sharing the PowerPoints, but they're placement holders for me. So either PowerPoints or Post-it notes, because I find that's the quickest way for me to say, oh, halfway through, I'm actually taking these 3 slides up there, because now that makes sense, right? And then if I'm doing something long, like several hours, then I print out my slides. And then on the physical printout version, I kind of highlight, oh, in this segment, our interaction is in the chat, and then we have annotation. In this portion, we're having a breakout group. In this portion, I'm having people do pairs. In this portion, I have them do a walk around the block and come back, and it's our 10-minute break. And then they come back and share this. So I'm kind of having like chunks, right? And rough timings, right? Rough. But more like a cluster of like, now it's this topic. And in this topic, I can expand that this much, or we don't have much time, but we still want to cover it, and then I shrink it. And guess what? I also, as a facilitator, I have the asynchronous, right? So what we didn't get covered that I wanted us maybe to go through, I have my slides now, and I can then create a quick video that becomes the post that leads into next time we meet. So that's still part of the process, right? Like that's still like, then we can then still be on track sometimes. I'm like, oh, that's just a 5-minute video where these are a couple of things we didn't get through, and then I'm creating like maybe a question around this and reflections so that we digest that before we meet next time, even though we didn't do it sync, we're then doing it async.
Are you saying then you might do a video with, I don't know if you're on camera or not, but where you share a few more slides, present an idea or a request, and then have them do some asynchronous work either on a Miro board or in Loom? Is that the answer?
Loom is a great video tool. I use Loom a lot, and the free version you can do unlimited 5-minute videos, I think. And it's like, oh, you really shouldn't do anything longer than 5 minutes anyway. So Loom, you can screen share, and then you just you're either a little round ball any size you want. So people see your face and you can put it wherever you want. So you're out of the Zoom grid. And you can just record it on the spot. It just counts down 1, 2, 3, 5. You're recording. Oh, I didn't like that. I'm going to do a new take. And then as soon as you're done, you've got a link. You just send it to your colleagues. Super easy. I'm not a native English speaker, and I find that writing, again, I'm doing it fine, obviously, but it's faster for me to do a quick video, and that kind of. And as I'm working with people who share work English as their work language, but typically don't have English as their first language, the more visuals I can add on, the better, right? So a video where I'm screen sharing a couple of slides, give them a lot of visuals, and then some bullet points on a slide, for example, right? So and that's a lot of information you would have written out, right? That's a long email.
That's true.
I feel like we probably should start to wrap up and give you your evening back. But so if there are, let's do a round of maybe a question each. If anyone wants to do that, we'll just go around the room, or anything that you want to say, as, one thing you learned that was just, wow, or just anything that comes to mind.
Yes, just kind of reactions or reflections. I like that. Thank you, Meei.
And I'll start that off. I never thought of the asynchronous work as helping people who don't think the same way, and it helps, it honors, in your words, honors different ways of thinking, and bring those thoughts to the table. I never thought of it that way. I always thought of it as homework or pre-meeting work or that kind of thing, but it just is a whole lot more. And so thanks for kind of putting that in that light.
Yeah, it is more, I do find it's more inclusive, like it's including a broader group of our colleagues.
I liked how you commented that facilitators make the space safe, fun, and productive. And all throughout this whole thing, you made the delineation between here's what a facilitator does well and why they're not the same as like a presenter. They're not the knowledge experts. You just kind of have to be there to hold that space, set those bounds, and guide everybody else through the process. And that takes a lot of stress off, knowing that like the next thing that I facilitate, I don't have to study for 3 days to make sure that everything is scripted. But I do have to be, it's teaching me that I need to practice something else, which is like being present in the moment, and being able to like live without being blinded by the spotlight and just doing what I remember. And I think that that's a very different type of task to learn, and that's exciting to learn because that feels a little bit more modern. Anybody can memorize it, but for somebody to be able to like react like this, I feel like that's the next step. And it seems like it helps more people. So this was really cool to see and hear and learn.
Yeah. Thank you. You put it very eloquently. I wish I was listening, so I didn't take note. But I like how you it takes the stress off, because I think often people are like, oh, I run a workshop a couple of times a year that's called SAVVY Virtual Facilitator, and a lot of people who sign up is because they're stressed out about they now have to run a certain thing at work, right? Maria took it several years ago, and I like her saying it's actually, the idea is to take the stress out, right? Like and Deanna was just doing this again, like to hold the container, and then the people are there will do the work, right? We're just
So I feel like the ask here was several different things. So I'll use mine to ask another question. So how, what tips and ideas do you have for something similar to what Maddie said, but when in the meeting, people are not engaging? So in this setting, I'm imagining people have cameras off as a culture, and the person running the meeting, I'm not going to tell you what facilitator presenter is saying, all right, now I'd like everyone's ideas. And I don't know, so I'll say 2 or 3 people often share ideas, and 2 or 3 people are often silent. So what are some ideas for this situation? How can we better or engagement, or is it AC? What do we do? What could?
Yeah, I would first of all, if it's the pattern of people are not like there's people who are on the audio, and then people who are kind of hiding and or not engaged, right? Or don't feel invited in. I mean, often it's people
silent for whatever reason.
Exactly, right. I think it's a big piece is to make sure that the invitation is always an invitation, and that people do feel invited in, that they don't feel pressured to do something, but that they're invited in. And by using different channels, that's where we often invite them in. So I would start by adding ideas on a board that's visual for everybody, and not use a chat. What happens in the chat is that everything becomes very linear, and exactly, right? Like we forget what was up there, so it becomes what's most current, or wherever I'm looking, and then I can't see it, right? Whenever we do a blank, like here is like, even if I just right now opened up like a whiteboard right here, just opening up a whiteboard, and I'll be like, now we're putting ideas in, and we're all just writing text in here, right? What happens? I'm just showing you, right? What happens is, and I'm just going to stop sharing again, but what happens is that there is a clean slate, and we're now all invited to fill that out together. Mm-hmm. And then you take enough time, and a part of it is also just sitting in the silence of like, okay, what happens? I'm really bad at it myself, but you can put a little bit of music on, or you can also say, let's for the next 4 minutes do this, like add ideas in, and then and like, oh, it seems like we need a little bit more time. I'm going to give us 2 more minutes. And indirectly you're saying, well, we're not stopping unless there's something on the board, right? But it's also like, it's a clean slate, and as a facilitator, you can add things as well. That's the thing, we don't have to be the expert, but we can add things in. So when a group is doing collaboration agreement, you as facilitator can say, oh, I have things I want to add. I want you to, it's important that we do the async homework, or it's important that we take a break halfway through. It doesn't mean that you don't have a voice. So whenever we do a clean slate, we as facilitator also can add in. So when you then have people writing things on, you can then be like, oh, let's start grouping things, or let's hear more about this. Tell me a little bit more about this. What would that look like? Are you agreeing with that, or with that? How do we? So now you're pulling, people have already put their stuff in, and you don't necessarily know who's who. So you're not pointing people out blank, but you're like, I want to hear more about that, or I want to, and yeah, in Zoom, for example, you would see who's writing what, right? But so then you're starting pulling people in. So that's one thing you could do. Putting people, say you are like was a scenario, like there's 8 people and a couple of people are talking, a couple of people are not. Just to like, oh, I'm just going to put you into pairs for 4 minutes, brainstorm on this, and then we'll discuss as a group. It works every time.
That might work for this group.
Yeah, it works every time. It's kind of rude to step into a room where there's just one other person and you don't turn on the video. That's just, so there's part of this, and then you're not pressuring, or at least the person who doesn't turn on the video, they can give context like, I'm in my PJs, or my kid is sleeping on the back and has a fever. Great, right? Like, you know, but you're just creating a different kind of space. Virtually also, in terms of getting cameras on, do an activity where you have to use the camera, like pick something in your office, or put something, doodle on a post-it and show it. I mean, there can just be fun ways to get people little, like playing around with the camera. And also, like, if they're engaged enough, fine. And if there is a way that they can show, a lot of people get fatigued in their heads by looking at themselves. And the newest study on Zoom, as we're looking at each other, is that it's terribly fatiguing. We don't go to work in the physical office and look at a mirror all day long of ourselves. We don't. But we're in Zoom meetings, we're like, oh, how's my hair? Right? Like, it's exhausting. It's like being a teenager in a cafe, you know, like when they're like seeing themselves in the mirror, like, oh, you know, constantly. It's like, so fair enough. Like that they don't want to be on all the time.
So you, I think I got some really great tips. And earlier you sort of mimicked the idea of a retro. So what sort of retro questions might you ask that, and I have a whole list of them, but I also am a little curious the way you might approach it. So knowing that we have some that participate and some that rarely do in the group discussions. So what questions might you ask?
So one thing that we didn't go, I was talking before about these different kind of processes through a virtual session, and I talked about icebreakers and check-ins. And another piece that we didn't talk about is checkouts, because part of holding the space is that you're opening it, but you're also closing it down. It doesn't mean we're finished, but it means that we're also like, okay, this is how far we've done, we are now. And then maybe I would say, I'm going to send a video capturing a couple of things, or so-and-so took notes and they're going to be uploaded here. Our next meeting is this, or in our post before our next XYZ is happening, right? So we're doing kind of a like, what comes after this, and we're all agreeing on that. You can also do a little kind of poll, a little evaluation. How is the temperature in this? Like, how did we feel on, if you're doing like a month, like a 4 weeks like trial, for example, or a project, or like an experiment, you could kind of do a little temperature check and like, how's this going? Like, did you feel there was more engaging than what before? Did you have, were you more involved, less involved? Like, you just kind of get a temperature check and see where people are at. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, I'm going to check us out here. I'm going to improvise my checkout and say thank you again so much, Lina. Thank you, Meei. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And I did record this. I don't record things often, so I'll have to see how that turned out. But if it's postable, I will figure out a way to send that out to everyone. And I hope to see you all again.
Thank you. And thanks for inviting me in, and have a good evening. And those people not on the West Coast time zones, it's definitely a little later for you all. So.
And Lina's contact information is in the Eventbrite invite and on your confirmation. So if you want to contact her, the website and stuff is in that. Okay.
Yeah, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn with me as well, if you feel that could be relevant for you.